how much does it actually cost to keep a bearded dragon? What's up, YouTube? So today's video, obviously the intro kind of gave it away. How much does it cost to actually keep a bearded dragon? Now I'm obviously talking about one individual bearded dragon for its entire life. I am not talking about keeping 20, 50, 80 bearded dragons for their entire lives. So this video, I want to go down and list a list of supplies that you may need. Obviously there's some things that you can get extra that I'm not going to list out today, but for the most part, these are the things that you're going to need for your bearded dragon. You're going to need an enclosure suitable for an adult bearded dragon. Even if you get a baby, I always recommend getting an adult-sized bearded dragon enclosure. So I've said this in the past, as long as you have 6 square feet of floor space, your bearded dragon will be happy. Now, obviously, it matters how you kind of work this out. So you don't want to get a, some kind of cube. That won't work too well. It has to be long. So most people will do at least, so the reason I say 6 square feet of floor space is because a 40-gallon is not 6 square feet of floor space. So a 40-gallon technically does not qualify for an adult bearded dragon, but it does qualify for up to an adult bearded dragon. And after that, you'll have to upgrade to a 4x2 enclosure. But I've seen people keep them in custom enclosures that are 3 foot long and 2 feet deep. And that works too. Obviously, if you have them, you're taking them out and you're doing this and you're doing all that, and they're not obviously spending their entire life in that 3x2 enclosure, that works well. If you won't have enough time to take them out all the time, a 4x2 enclosure works well as well. So these enclosures can easily range from $300 to $500, depending on if you're getting custom made or if you're getting pre-manufactured enclosures online. The thing is, that's not all you need. So if you're getting pre-manufactured enclosures, they usually come with a screen top, and the screen top would mean that you need all these dome lights to hold the heat lamp and the UVB fixture that houses the UVB light. So these are things that are going to be extra from those enclosures. So you're also going to have to be spending probably another $100 to $150 on the lighting for heat, UVB, and also the fixtures to hold those lights in place. Now, I make my own enclosures, and to make my own enclosures, I usually spend about $200 to $300 each with the lights and everything else that goes into them. So I think building your own or doing a DIY enclosure is obviously going to be better than buying one, but that's obviously up to you. If you don't think you're handy or whatever, you do what you got to do. Now, oh, what's up there, YouTube? So I'm actually building an enclosure here. But not just any enclosure. This enclosure is one that I'm filming for my members on YouTube and Patreon. So if you want to learn how to make one of these, join my membership on YouTube or Patreon. So check back on the memberships and you'll be able to see how I made this enclosure. Let me let you get back to the video now. After you get all of those supplies, you're also going to need calcium, and you're also going to need multivitamins and all of that as well. Those are going to be a lot of things you have to buy, I would say, alongside the feeder. So if you're buying feeders, you're probably going to also have to be buying calcium. You obviously can buy calcium for an entire month or 2 months or 3 months, depending on how long that tub lasts you. So obviously it depends how often you're feeding, how much calcium you're dusting the bugs with, and all of that. Then there's greens. You have to feed them greens every day. Up to this point, the enclosure, the fixtures, the lighting, the food, I would say you're probably up to, so I'm not going to consider the feeders and the greens yet, because those are daily purchases, or at least daily feeds. So up to this point, you're probably already up to, let's say, $600. And that's just the initial cost, because you're getting supplies, you're getting, obviously you don't want a bare tank, so you're getting all this decor and everything else that goes with it. So you're probably already up to $600. Now, depending on the age of your bearded dragon or the size of your bearded dragon, because all bearded dragons do grow differently, you could be spending a crap ton on feeders. Now, if you are a person that is getting a bearded dragon from the time that it's about 3 months old, then you're not going to be spending as much as a person that's getting a bearded dragon at the time that they're 1 month old. Or if you're a person getting one that's already a year old, you're not going to be spending the same amount of money as somebody that's getting one at 3 months old. So this does matter. The reason I say this matters is because if your bearded dragon is anywhere below 40 grams or so, you're going to be feeding it quite often, because those things are a little hungry, and they will eat non-stop. So at that point, below that weight threshold, so usually they're eating smalls below 40 grams, and they're usually eating about 10 to 15 smalls a day. So with that said, you're probably feeding 70 to about, let's say 100, 120 bugs a week. So you're going to be spending quite a bit on bugs every week. Obviously, if you're buying bugs weekly instead of in bulk and feeding it over a course of a month, you're going to be spending a little bit more than if you were buying them in a group of 1,000 bugs for 10 weeks or 6 weeks or however long that 1,000 bugs last you. Now, I looked at some prices online, and usually about 100 bugs or so, 100 to, I would say, I actually priced that at 150 to go over, because sometimes they will die while you're feeding them off or throughout the week. Sometimes all bugs do not last the entire week. So I said about 150 to 200 bugs is where you're going to be buying every week if you're getting a baby that's below 40 grams of weight. And that usually will cost you about $20 a week. That doesn't seem like a lot. So usually up to the 40 gram mark, usually that's about 3-4 months or so. So 30 grams to 40 grams is about the 3-month mark. So you're going to be spending, most people will sell you their bearded dragons at 2 months. So for at least 2 months, you're going to be spending $20 a week. So that's at least $160 that you spent there already, just from 2 months to 4 months. From 4 months to about 8 months, or up to 80 grams. Sometimes bearded dragons do grow a lot faster than others. So sometimes you have 4-month-old bearded dragons that are 70 grams. So that just depends on your individual bearded dragon's growth rate. But up to the 80 gram mark, from the 40 gram mark, you're feeding them a lot less often, because you don't want them to skyrocket in size all of a sudden. So you're feeding them, usually at that size, you're feeding them mediums, maybe mediums, depends on what you're comfortable with. And at that size, you're probably spending about $16 every week, because you're buying less bugs. So at that point, you're probably, I would say, for the next 6 months or so, you're probably going to be buying at least $16 or so every week, because bearded dragons, even though they do grow pretty quickly, their head size doesn't grow that quickly, and you want to make sure you're getting feeders that are small enough that fit between their eyeballs. So usually that space between their eyes is the size of the feeder or smaller. So their heads don't get massive or anything like that. So you got to make sure you're buying feeders to the adequate size. So usually for about 6 months or so, you're going to be buying mediums, and those mediums are going to cost you about $380 for 6 months time frame, at about $16 or so, give or take. I don't know if I'm rounding up or down. I kind of just went with the nearest whole number there. So you've already spent, let's say, $200 on the first 2 months of ownership, and now you're spending another $380 on the next 6 months of ownership. So you're probably already looking at a bearded dragon that's about 10 months old. So at 10 months old, you've already probably spent, $1,200 on this bearded dragon, and you haven't even bought the bearded dragon. So I'm not even taking into consideration the price of the bearded dragon at all in this entire video, because there's bearded dragons that are going to be $50. There's going to be bearded dragons that are $1,000. So that's up to you entirely what you want to spend on your bearded dragon. But everything that I'm talking is going to apply to every single bearded dragon, because of the fact that every bearded dragon's care is somewhat the same. Some bearded dragons, like I said, grow differently, and you will have to feed them differently as well. Now, from the time they're about 10 months to 14 months, so another 6-month time frame, they're going to be eating large. Or there's larges that are closer to the medium size than they are to the extra large size. So it really depends on where you see your bearded dragon's size at that point. But usually up to like 14 months or so, it's about 200 grams. So from the time that they are 80 grams to the time that they're about, I would say, 150 to 200 grams, depending on how fast they grow, you would probably be feeding. So within that 6-month time frame, that bearded dragon is probably going to be doubling in size, if not more. So that's why you're going to be feeding largest by that time frame. So with that said, you're going to be feeding a lot less bugs less frequently, so your price goes down to about $11 a week. And at that point, you're not going to be spending more than, probably like $200 or so every 6 months, maybe $250 or so every 6 months. So that usually, I tell people, if you want to go bigger bugs than that, you can. But usually I tell people that from then on, I always feed large. You can feed extra large as well, which is fine. There's not much of a benefit there. It's feeding large to extra large. There's not much of a price change or a size difference. And if you want to go ahead and feed extra large, by all means do it. But again, you're probably going to still be feeding the same amount of bugs as if you were just buying large. And it really just depends on what you want to do. But at this point on, you're probably going to be feeding the largest or the extra largest for the entire life of the bearded dragon. And from this point on, at least up till they're about 300 to 350 grams or so, you will be feeding them every week about $11 or so worth of bugs. So if you go and you get a bunch of different types of bugs at once, obviously that's going to cost you more. And there's some bugs that are way more expensive than other bugs. Like if you get a hornworm or so, like a cup of hornworms is like $30, versus if you get, you know, a cup of dubia roaches, it's like 15 bucks. So obviously it makes a difference. And the hornworms are not really nutritional at all. They're kind of just for treats. So it really just depends on what you buy. So the first 12 months of life, you've probably already spent, let's say, $1,400 on that bearded dragon. And then from year to year to year after that, you're probably going to be spending about $500 or so on that bearded dragon on feeders. And that is going to, so all of this, I'm including the price of the bugs as well as the price of greens. And the greens don't really make or break it, because you can get a bag of greens for like $3, and that'll last you probably 2 weeks if you can keep them fresh. So it doesn't really make or break it. Just keep that in mind. But everything else, the bugs will make a huge impact on your entire budget. So from that first year all the way on into the rest of their life, you're going to be buying at least $500 worth of bugs every year. So that breaks it down to about $60 or so a month. And obviously that's not just talking one staple feeder, that's talking about getting different things, and different things, like I said, do have different prices. So it really just depends on what you like to do. I don't like getting my bearded dragons over 400 grams. So even after the 350 mark, I do actually bring it down even to half of that. So it really, that's just my preference. I don't like my bearded dragons to get massive. So that's just my preference. And you're probably like, oh, you sound like a terrible person. You don't want the bearded dragons to get big like they're supposed to. No, actually, bearded dragons don't get more. So on average, bearded dragons get from 18 to 24 inches. And right in the middle, guess what? You're at 21, 22 inches or so. And most of my bearded dragons are about 18 to 20 inches. And that's where I like them. And most of my bearded dragons are young as well, with the oldest probably being like 3 years old. So bearded dragons will continue to grow for their entire life. That's why they shed every year. At least once a year they will shed. Probably 3, 4, maybe 6 times a year they will shed. So that means they are growing, or else they would not shed. I've had bearded dragons that I've had up to like 6, 7 years, and they've gotten to that 23-inch mark. I've even had a bearded dragon that was 3 years old get up to like 24 inches, because every dragon grows differently. So I keep iterating in that, because that is just how things go. So I would say if you have had a bearded dragon for 10 years, and the first year you've already spent $1,400, and then every year after that you're going to be spending $500, and that's 9 times 5. That's $4,500 that you spent just on the last 9 years. And the first year, another $1,400. I think that's what I said. So let's say, all in all, you have spent $7,000 on your bearded dragon. And that's not even including the price of the bearded dragon. So obviously that matters to nobody. You spend whatever you want on your bearded dragon. That's up to you entirely. But I know for a fact that spending $7,000 is a lot of money. But like I said, you're going to be doing this over the course of 10 years. In order to have an exotic pet, you usually have to have exotic pet money. So that means you got to be spending a little bit more than if it was just a furry animal there. But just to kind of give you an idea, most likely they're going to be around the same price. So if you already have a dog, or have had dogs in the past and you thought they were expensive, you're probably going to think the same thing about a bearded dragon. So get one anyways, because it doesn't really matter at this point. Just get one and you'll be happy either way. So if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. As always, peace.